Everything that I had heard about boys before I had a boy, and Joel's heard this because Joel's got a little boy. Everything I heard came true. And there's not a day that I don't hear something break,
Yeah.
something gets destroyed. The like a ADT alarm system, you've got like contacts and like glass break contacts and shit. The alarm will trigger because every day it's something.
That
So
is
this
hilarious.
is my solace. I get a half hour solace talking about a
Right.
bunch of bullshit because that's what
Yeah.
we're gonna do is talk a bunch of bullshit.
Yep. No, I like it. I like it.
You and I actually met I think it was in 2019 when I was in Vegas with Sean.
No, I remember that. Yeah.
Yeah. And you were there, and because I was looking you up the other day because I like to try to get stuff for the intro. So I was looking you up to try to find stuff for the intro, and I was like, we definitely met in Vegas.
I can always figure out who the real ones are because they'll come up and introduce themselves. And it was Sean and you and Monster.
Okay, yeah.
Oh, yeah, I like Jason. Yeah.
And yeah, I don't know. That's just the thing with me. I'm terrible at ice breaking. I'm terrible at like walking up and initiating that.
Okay.
So like the fact that Sean came up and was like, and he's always been super nice to us. And we've always tried to show you guys like as much sort of shine as we can. And I think there's sort of a mutual appreciation there. But yeah, I know. I remember meeting you. Yeah.
Years ago, I had a wrestling site called knowyournews.com or jimmyband.com, like a long time ago. And back then, it almost like it was taboo to be friends with somebody from another website.
Oh, that's funny.
You know what I mean? Because it's like, oh, they're your competitor. And I find that so like now, and I realize I'm not Sean. Sean's the face, and I'm not, and that's cool. But now I have no problem reaching out to Raj, Jiri, no problem.
Sure. Yeah,
and like talking to you and like the Wrestle Talk guys. Everybody's cool. Why should there be this weird? You know what I mean?
Yeah. We like to be friends with everybody. Like I'm literally wearing a Deadlock shirt right now. We're friends with you guys. We're friends with I've been on Wrestle Talk. I've been on Cultaholic. We want to work with Monster at some point. He's very friendly with us. It's funny though because there's some personalities who like we're totally cool with, but like otherwise in terms of like collaborations are where it's at. Like I remember when we first hooked up with like Brian Zane, we did a whole picture at StarCast. I forget which year it was, where it was us, Zane, Matthew from Botchamania, one of the other Cultaholic guys, and people just completely lost it over that photo because it was like, oh my God, so many different of our favorite content creators in one photo. People love that kind of shit. People love the team ups. They love the collaborations.
And then it happens on the other side when a bunch of folks go out for dinner before an AEW pay-per-view. And
you're bringing that up?
Dorks going after them.
I don't know. I have no idea. That picture and that whole situation is absolutely bizarre. I've always wondered if it was, especially in Sean's case, because he's sort of become, honestly, in my eyes, he's sort of replaced Meltzer as like the guy. Like he's the guy now. And I wonder if there's just an element of like a certain element of people are just turned off by somebody who knows stuff. I know stuff that you don't know, and they want to tear that down. As like me and Larson, we're a couple of clowns who just like wrestling and we enjoy talking about it and we become successful doing that. We don't claim to know anything. I don't want to know anything. Like we have our fair share of friends and we've gotten our fair share of info, but like we're so public about everybody we know, they would know who we got it from. It's like Sean obviously puts in his work and has those relationships. And people hate that. Like a certain weird like subsection of people I don't know what it is. It's the, stuff I don't know. I don't like that,
I think it's a jealousy of success.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
And there was one time where there was a guy that rattled Sean enough because every now and then Sean will come to me. Let's say if somebody's threatening legal or something.
Yeah, right.
He'll come to me because I can squash the stuff pretty quick. But there was one time that some guy bothered Sean enough that he brought him into a chat with me. And the guy's, I have no problem telling you, the guy's handle had like neckbeard in it. I didn't even know what the fucking neckbeard was. I didn't Google it. Didn't even know what it was.
Yeah.
So Sean brings me into a chat with this guy, and the guy was so angry. And I said one thing to the guy. I said, look, I hope you find happiness in your life so that you're not wasting your time arguing with a guy that brings wrestling news.
Yeah.
As soon as I said that, he left the chat.
Yeah.
And I just thought, this is just a miserable dude, man. That's all it is. They're just miserable people.
Yeah. And I honestly think, and that's what I tell my kids the same thing. I'm like, just remember, if if anybody's bullying you at school, it's like, it's good to stand up for yourself. You need to do that. But you also have to understand they don't have the kind of home life that you do. Like there's a good possibility those people are just miserable and they take it out on the people around them. And that's like a lot of that's so much of the toxicity out there. It's clear they're fucking miserable people. That's
what bullies are too.
Yeah.
That's what they are. How long have you been doing this? How long have you been doing your stuff?
So Larson and I have been friends since literally high school. We've known each other since I was a junior and he was a senior in physics class, and we became really good friends in college. And then around 2009, I was looking for a job because I had just left mine, and he was looking for a voiceover guy for the place that he worked, and that place was Machinima, which I don't know if you know or not, but Machinima was like one of the first really, really big YouTube channels that mainly did like video game related content. And so I was like, yeah, sure. You know, cause he was like, hey, you have a voice. You want to come and roll through LA? Cause I was on my way down there. And I was like, yeah, sure. So I did that. Long story short, he needed an editor. And then they turned us into personalities for a top 10 type show for video games. That went really, really well. And it worked out. We built an audience, and then we got laid off from that place because that was a place that was just constantly trying to sell the company. And so, you know, with that comes budget cuts, layoffs, trying to trim the fat, et cetera, et cetera. They couldn't figure out how to monetize us, even though we were doing like millions of views per quarter. Like we were doing just a ton of views. And so we got laid off, and we were like, you know what? Video games isn't really our thing. Like we did it for about 5 years, I guess. And we were just like, you know what? We really enjoy talking about pro wrestling. And then a year earlier, we had started Going in Raw, the podcast, with our friend Dan. And it was just sort of a collaboration that we just sort of fell into because we were supposed to collaborate on something else. And while we were getting to know each other, he was talking about wrestling. He just sort of talked about wrestling. And then we were like, oh, we know that, you know, backwards and forwards. And so we were talking for a good half hour, and I just sort of said, this sounds like a podcast about wrestling. And he said, oh, we should call it Going in Raw, because the idea then was we would review pay-per-views going into the next episode of Raw. And there is the sexual innuendo as well, and the vulgarity is funny. And so we were like, yeah, no, it's a great idea. And so we did that, and he was with us for, I don't know, probably, we only did it monthly back then, probably for like, I don't know, maybe 10 episodes or so. And then we were like, hey, we're really into this. We want to do it weekly now. And he was like, yeah, okay, fine. Just go do whatever we want. Eventually, he just sort of stopped doing it and gave us our blessing to just create a whole channel around it. And so probably in 2016, I think, is when it really took off for us. I think Paige had some shenanigans in Las Vegas, and we did a news video, and that like really blew up and started. It was the thing. It was like the video that did the thing where all of a sudden you get like a ton of subs and everybody knows who you are in that niche. And so, yeah, we just, you know, we launched our Patreon, I think, in 2017, and that was also a big help. And then, yeah, things just really started taking off. And so, yeah, that's sort of our story. We're still somehow doing it.
Good for you. Good for you. So you guys are full time.
Oh, yeah. We've been full time. We've been full time doing this since January 2017.
Good for you guys.
Yeah.
Good for you guys. Oh, that's good. Yeah, I love hearing stories like that because it can be tough to make a good living doing this. And it's funny because I started Fightful for fun. I didn't start it to make money.
Mm-hmm, yeah.
And so it took 5 years for Fightful to make money.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't care too much, but Sean sure as hell did. And Sean used to hit me up and he'd be like, do I need to look for a job?
Mm-hmm.
And I would tell him, just keep doing what you're doing. It's going to work out. Keep doing. And then eventually it did.
Mm-hmm.
But good for you guys. I like hearing stories about, because obviously you got to work for it. No one's going to hand you opportunity. You got to work for it. And so I respect, people like you and like Denise Salcedo and Chris Van Vliet and the ones that like actually put in the work. It's not like you can just snap your fingers and all of a sudden you're successful.
Yeah, it's funny because to see the industry, like the niche wrestling media industry, evolve even from when, I mean, God, even over the past 2 years since pandemic, like it has evolved huge. And so to go back to like 2017 when we really dove in full time, because like after we got laid off, that same company was like, hey, we laid off all our content creators. Can you do some freelance work for us? And we're like, fine, we need the money. So we have to now go back and do that. And so, but by January 2017, we were doing so well with Going In Raw that we didn't need to do that anymore. And that really wasn't bringing in that much money compared to the work we were putting in. So we were able to actually say goodbye to them on our terms after we had been laid off by them 2 years earlier. And so, so to see it back then and to see how sort of small it was, like there was not a lot. When we got started as a podcast, it was like, in terms of the fan-centric podcast, like Talk is Jericho was out there, Austin's podcast was out there, but like it was like Solomonster and like I know Wrestle Talk was definitely a thing. I don't know if they were really doing the podcast stuff. Cultaholic was Cultaholic was What Culture. It was that those guys were doing that, but like there really is Zane was doing his videos, but there wasn't a whole lot else at the time. And so, I mean, we were fortunate, like we jumped into it relatively early without realizing that the field wasn't saturated the way the video game field was. And so it was like, we sort of benefit from just being legacy guys. Like we've been there and we've been able to maintain our community and actually grow our community, which is awesome. But we did have sort of a leg up because we were like one of the first ones to do it. And that helped immensely, just sort of doing it one of the first ones. But it's really interesting to watch so many other people, especially since pandemic, when like Zoom has become a thing, or StreamYard has become a thing, to watch other people be like, hey, you know what, I want to say something about wrestling too. And so you see all these other ones pop up.
I remember hearing something about how you guys stopped covering Raw.
It's so funny how stuff like that gets so twisted. So when Raw had that stretch where it was just really bad.
Yeah.
Like it was,
I'm like now where it's just knock it out of the park, right?
It's compared to the empty arena stuff, compared to where it was 2021, 2020, like late 2020, where it was damn near unwatchable. I mean, at least these days you have some acts on Raw that are actually fairly entertaining. I've loved the Kevin Owens Ezekiel stuff, has been hilarious. Seth Rollins is doing career work. I think there's stuff to appreciate these days, and the live crowd does bring a lot to it. But so what happened was we used to do post Raw reviews. So right when Raw finished, we'd have just gotten done watching 3 hours of Raw, which is an awful thing to do for anybody. I'm sorry, but if you cannot fast forward through commercials and recaps, it's a chore. It's an absolute chore. Even today, it's a chore with like stuff that you can still appreciate. But back then, during that stretch where it was just horrible, we were like, look, if our business model depends on us being miserable Monday nights, we don't have much of a business model to stand on. And we knew that we could afford to not do Raw live. We could just push it to the next day because we've got, between Twitch and YouTube and our ad integrations with our management, like we've got a pretty varied revenue stream situation going. So it's like, if we can do that. And I texted him one night. I think there was something specific that happened. And it was like Shayna Baszler lost to like a comedy act. It was like Reggie or something like that. And I texted Larson. I was like, I can't do this anymore. Like, we're going to start doing this on Tuesdays. And he texted me back something like, yeah, no, we're going to start doing it on Tuesdays. So just for a matter of like, so we announced it that night because I'm impatient. And so I'm like, look, we're not going to think about this any more than we have to. I have a headache right now because I just watched Raw for 3 hours. I literally had, like, it was a toss-up week to week whether or not I'd have a headache after watching Raw. And you don't want to, that's one thing I've really learned is, I always heard that Letterman used to be grumpy up until the time of the show, right? And then he'd turn it on because he realized that you need that energy to be entertaining. And what we do, look, we don't provide inside sources or scoops. That's your guys' job. Our job is to be entertaining talking about wrestling. And we can't do that if I'm suffering from a headache and Larson's grumpy. We just can't. So we said on the show, hey, this is the last time we're doing Monday Night Raw live after Raw, which was the big qualifier there. And just as a matter of letting our audience know, I clipped that and I put it on Twitter. just because like, hey, I need to let our audience know what's going on with our programming. Well then, and I sort of titled it, we're tapping out on Monday nights.
Okay.
Well, for some reason, nobody listened to the actual video where I say, yeah, Monday night reviews, they're going to be done. We're going to be doing them on Tuesday. And that was it. It wasn't a big deal. But then people picked it up and it was like, oh, program named after Raw, which it's like, yeah, I regret the name of the show. Okay. Like, I didn't realize that AEW was going to be the thing. I didn't realize SmackDown, which back when we started the show was a clip show for Raw. It was like the Firm B show. And so it's like, yeah, the show that's literally, some people thought we only covered Raw because of the name of the show.
I can see that. Yeah.
And so they were like, oh, the guys that cover Monday Night Raw aren't going to cover Monday Night Raw anymore. I'm like, no, none of that's true. Number one, we don't only cover Raw. And number two, we're still covering Raw. It's just going to be the next day. So yeah, that got out there and it was like, no, that's not actually true. Like, just watch the video. Watch 10 seconds of the video and you'll know exactly what I'm talking about.
Gotcha. How old are your kids?
Oh man, so I've got a 7-year-old, and then I have 3 stepkids that are like super old. There's like one's 23, one's 19, and one's 18.
Okay. Your 7-year-old, boy or girl?
Oh, it's a little girl, Alabama. Yeah.
I have a 7-year-old girl as well.
Oh man, you're so lucky. She is absolutely wonderful and hilarious and smart, and I love every second of it. It's amazing.
Yeah, it is good. I have a 5-year-old boy as well, and he is a handful.
Oh, you did the 2 kids thing. Okay.
Did the 2 kids thing.
Yeah, I at one point 10 years ago, I had 4 because there was a period of time when my niece lived with me, and she's the same age as my middle stepkid. So we had them all around that age, like around 8, 9, 10. And that's a handful. That is a handful. Yeah.
Roses are red, violets are blue. I click the subscribe button. You really should too. If you like videos about real news stories that are funny, stupid, or weird, subscribe now.